Welcome back to Knowledge Resources Author Insights.
Today we're sitting down with Zanele Njapha, contributor for our Improving Mental Health in the Workplace book. You've been published in Forbes, Mail and The Guardian. You're an expert on change and has helped PwC and Volkswagen and many other companies, as I understand, navigate change. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to work on this project and what drew you to the project in the first place?
Sure. Thank you so much, Amy. It's lovely to be having this conversation with you and an honor to be involved in this amazing publication. So the work that I do, like you said, is all around change and transitions. And I'm known to most of my clients as the unlearning lady, which I often say sounds like a superhero name. It sounds a lot cooler than it actually is. And basically what it means is that I help individuals and organizations that are on the move, I like to say, to challenge their thinking and the way that they approach disruption. So it's a method of getting organizations to rather self-disrupt rather than wait for external circumstances to disrupt them. How do we internally create cultures where we're always disrupting ourselves on a day-to-day so that when external circumstances come about, we're almost prepared and we've strengthened that muscle of constant self-disruption. So that's pretty much it. I co-wrote, as most of the individuals that are watching this might know, the first chapter of the book on the COVID context and just laying out what some of the big picture thinking is with a colleague of mine, Graham Codrington, who I work very closely with at Tomorrow Today Global. And he's a futurist, very much like myself. And we co-wrote this chapter together, him bringing in this big reimagination context and me, this context around change. How do we, instead of waiting for circumstances to disrupt us, but rather start to look at how has the COVID context set up a context for us to change our cultures and rather self-disrupt?
I was going to ask you, Zanele, because one of the headings in your chapter is to predict or prepare, but it does sound that preparing is your method of predicting. It's this almost intertwined thing. Would you care to expand a little bit on that? It's such an interesting concept to me.
It is. I love that, Amy. Actually, while you were sharing, I was thinking about this quote that says, the future leaves clues. And I think in our work as futurists, often individuals will go, oh, let us know what's the future all about. But rather, it's a lot less about the future if you think about it. It's a lot more about how can we create contexts where we almost take the future back into our own hands, because being a futurist is very much like people wanting you to see what's around the corner. But because what's around the corner changes all the time, it really is about how do we prepare ourselves so that by the time we get around the corner, we're less surprised about what's there, and then taking back our sense of advocacy in that way. So really that's what it's about. And you're so right, that first chapter has one of those themes of, do we prepare or do we predict? What are we really supposed to do? And it is a combination of both. And one of the best ways actually to predict is to prepare. It's this funny sort of play on words, but it's one of the biggest questions so many organizations are asking, especially after COVID, and with mental health being one of the big legacies of COVID that we've seen. Biggest question that organizations are asking is, how do we move forward? And one of the best ways is to do that is work on yourself so that by the time you get around the next corner, you're less surprised by what's there.
I think that's such an incredible skill to have and to teach to other people, not just organizations, but in our personal lives as well. I think we've suddenly been faced with uncertainty, not knowing, not being able to plan ahead that much. How do you think society has done in adapting to this change? Just as a broad overview, do you think we've done better than expected, as well as expected?
Okay, that's a very good question. And I think that based on what we had access to, what we knew and what we didn't know, we did what we could, because I like to say that we can only judge success based on what an individual had access to, resource-wise, insights-wise, maybe even networks as well. So with what we had, we did what we could. But now, and I love the quote by Maya Angelou, where she says that when you know better, you do better. Now the responsibility is so much higher on organizations, because we know better now. Because what COVID did, and thankfully for it in one sense, is that it really helped to awaken us to just how disruptive and systematic changes are. If we look at Black Swan events, which are life-shifting events that change industries, change conversations, that change how businesses do their work, COVID-19 was a black swan, and it gave us a great example of how to prepare and how to act going forward. So with what we knew, I think we can forgive ourselves, but going forward, we can't anymore. We can't play the excuse of ignorance anymore. We're now in a position to do so much better. So on the conversation then of change, and I give some context in the book around this, around how individuals, and I like what you said, Amy, around individuals and organizations, because it's a two-edged sword. We can't expect individuals in the workplace who are consistently creative and innovative and also mentally fit if this is not something that's been practiced in the personal sense as well. So one of the things that I do give context in the book is that, but to go into a little bit more detail, maybe 3 things that I often say are really important for us to build mental flexibility. And this is not just because we live in a world of black swans, but also because there's recent research now that's showing that illnesses like Alzheimer's have been linked obviously to genes and to environmental factors, but also to a lack of mental flexibility. How are we on a day-to-day basis in our everyday lives just doing things in subtly different ways? And 3 things that I always advise individuals just on a personal level is switch, shift, and shuffle. So find little ways that you can switch the hand you brush your teeth with or you comb your hair with. And then shift is all about how can I move things around? When I ask my clients a lot of the time, and you'll be surprised, this used to be me for quite a while. How long has your bedroom been set up in the exact same way? I'll get answers like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, because we love that comfort, but I think we fail to understand that comfort actually doesn't work in our favor. So it's switch, shift, and then shuffle is the last one. Shuffle is all about looking at your diary, challenging yourself by speaking to people that don't leave you in your echo chamber, where everything you say gets regurgitated back to you. And you think, oh, my friends are so understanding. No, it's because they believe the same things that you believe and they like the same things that you like. So how can we shuffle our lives around in tiny, tiny ways that actually make the biggest difference? I think that the more we can take change away from being this huge mammoth task and just make it little bite-sized things that we do on a day-to-day, then it's less threatening and less intimidating when we get to changes that require our lives to almost be flipped inside out. So that's a tip that I think people will find very valuable.
I think it's incredibly valuable because it's so challenging. I realize the importance of it, but also the challenge. I would have to force myself to do that. And I'm sure so many other people would as well. But the importance of it is what I think you highlight in the chapter and what I think is so valuable, just preparing for that change and having the discipline to prepare for that change.
Absolutely. And I think as you were speaking now, it just reminded me of, because we hate change, we almost have to seek it. And it's that initial phase, especially as we start to have the conversations around mental health in the workplace. It's just the initial phase of putting into practice the systems and putting into place the procedures. But from there, I promise it does get easier. Some interesting research was published at Stanford University that says the average human being thinks between 50 and 60,000 thoughts every single day. But 90% of them are exactly the same as what we thought yesterday. And for me, what that says is we think we're showing up as different individuals to new situations, to new scenarios. But all we're doing is we're pattern matching everything we did yesterday with the same sort of similar situations that we're faced with today. So that initial phase of breaking out of the routine is going to be the hardest. So now, as individuals and organizations read this book, putting in those systems right in the beginning is going to be really challenging. But they need to almost gear up for that, prepare for it, with the understanding that later on they will hit a moment in time where things will start to flow because the system will become a new default and a new norm over time.
That's incredible, Zanele. And I'm so excited for this book to be out and about. I think, as you said, it's going to be a guide and such a good practical way of putting in those systems. So thank you so much for being a contributor to it. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely. I'm also looking forward to lots of individuals getting their hands on it and really, really using this, like you said, as a playbook, as a guide for how to really start the conversation and get our systems in place.
Great. The book is available or will be available online and hard copies, so be sure to get your copy today.